back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we are getting Lord of the Rings spoilers now. I already talked about the One Ring yesterday, and I'm not sure what's going on with the spoiler schedule here. We already got March of the Machine spoilers. Now we're getting some Lord of the Rings spoilers. I don't love the overlap in the spoilers. I kind of like to focus on one set at a time, but nevertheless, we got some really interesting legendary creatures here that I like to talk about. And there are going to be a specific few that I talk about and a specific few that I don't talk about. And the reason why is because of a certain mechanic that is in this set. So let's quickly look at Samwise the Stout-Hearted. 1 and a white, halfling peasant, 2/1 with flash. When Samwise the Stout-Hearted enters the battlefield, choose up to one target permanent card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn. Return it to your hand. Then the ring tempts you. And I don't know what that means. And I got to be honest, I don't love, the phrase, the reading the card explains the card. I like that. I like to be able to look at a card and know exactly what it does just by reading it. They purposely didn't put what that ability does on the cards. And I watched a video actually from Magic the Gathering that they put out, I think yesterday, where they specifically said they're not going to release what that ability does. I don't know if they have yet. I don't know when they're going to, but obviously it's really, really difficult for me to evaluate any of these commanders that has that phrase on it. There's a few that have this ring tempting you ability on it. I don't know if it has to do with the actual card, the One Ring. Nevertheless, there's not much point in me evaluating this as a commander because I don't know what that ability does, right? So I won't be covering any of those commanders in any of my videos until I actually know what that ability does. When I figure it out, then I'll get back to these, right? So let's get to some commanders that I actually know what's going on here. So Sauron the Lidless Eye. That's a really funny name, the Lidless Eye. 3 black and a red, Avatar Horror 4/4. When Sauron the Lidless Eye enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. Untap it. It gains haste until end of turn. Pay 1 black and a red. Creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. Each opponent loses 2 life. Pretty good commander. I mean, obviously this is an incredibly iconic character in the Lord of the Rings series. I'm not a huge buff on Lord of the Rings, so I don't know a ton of it. There are a few characters that I will talk about here that I'm not super familiar with. This one, obviously, I think everyone is. I don't know if they made this powerful enough, to be honest. Like, Sauron's supposed to be really, really powerful, right? Isn't he? I mean, I guess if he has the ring, he's way more powerful. So maybe, I guess people that know more about Lord of the Rings can explain that. But, from what most people know about Lord of the Rings, Sauron's like this big bad guy. And I was kind of expecting a little bit more out of this. Still pretty good. So your commander enters the battlefield, gain control of target creature an opponent controls until end of turn. You get that act of treason sort of effect on your commander. So you're stealing a creature that you can then do whatever you want with. Obviously, if I'm building this deck, I'm going to put lots of sack outlets in it because I can steal those creatures and then sacrifice them before my opponents get them back. Obviously, people aren't going to love that. This is likely going to be a build that people aren't going to love because most players don't like having their stuff stolen. I sure don't. Also, that second ability is pretty neat as well. Just speeding up the game, really. Honestly, as a build around, there's not a lot of really interesting things you can do here off the top of my head. Again, having sack outlets or things you can do with your commander. Your commander has an ETB, so a Conjurer's Closet's going to be great, but Conjurer's Closet is going to be great, extra great, for a couple of reasons. And the reason why is because obviously you can blink your commander to reuse its ability, although gaining control of an opponent's creature on your end step, again, the only reason to do that is to immediately sacrifice it before they get it back. Although Conjurer's Closet can also work on the creature that you're stealing, right? Again, you have to get into the specific wording there. If a card says exile that creature and then return it to the battlefield under your control, that means your opponent is never going to get it back, right? So you steal that creature on your end step, you blink it, return it to the battlefield under your control. It's now considered a new creature and you now permanently control it. So Conjurer's Closet or any blinking effect that work that way are probably going to be really good in this deck. And then, giving your team a buff is always good. Having your opponent's life get drained is always good. You can build around that a little bit, I guess. I'm not super thrilled about this commander. It's okay. Let's move on to Aragorn and Arwen wed. I think most people are familiar with the Aragorn and the Arwen characters. Here they're getting married, I guess. So they're wed. So they're now a couple. 4 green and a white human elf noble. 3/6 with vigilance. When Aragorn and Arwen wed enters the battlefield or attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control. You gain 1 life for each other creature you control. So, again, I'm not getting super thrilled about this commander. We're in the life gain theme, which has been done a whole bunch, and we're in the +1/+1 counter theme, which has done a whole bunch in white and green colors. In fact, there's even commanders like Lathiel that is doing both +1/+1 counter and life gain theme combined, which I think is probably better than this and is cheaper as well. 6 mana is a lot. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, again, you could do the blinking thing, I guess. You're putting a +1/+1 counter on each other creature you control, which is good, but it's not very good unless you have a big team. If you don't have a big team, you're not getting a lot of payoff, right? You really need a go-wide strategy in order to make this good. Again, we have a couple of sort of generic abilities. There's nothing really that interesting here as a build around. I don't love it. So far, I'm not super impressed by these commanders. They're a little on the boring side, to be quite honest. Moving on, Tom Bombadil. So not familiar with this character at all. I don't think it was in the movies at all. Again, I read a couple books, but not much. Wooburg commander. So white, blue, black, red, and a green. So another 5-color commander in the format. God Bard. So it's a god, eh? That's interesting. Already, because it's a god, if we don't even look at what else it's doing, you can do, and this is something that people have been doing a lot in the format for a long time, is 5-color god tribal. And now you got a 5-color god commander that you can do god tribal with, maybe. Anyway, what else is it doing? It's a 4/4 as long as there are 4 or more lore tokens among sagas you control. Tom Bombadil has hexproof and indestructible. Okay, so maybe we're not doing God Tribal here. I mean, you could, but obviously you're going to want to do sagas. Whenever the final chapter ability of a saga you control resolves, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a saga card. Put that card onto the battlefield and rest on the bottom of your library in random order. This ability triggers only once each turn. Wow. So 5-color saga tribal. Again, another commander that probably a lot of people have been waiting for. And another commander that I'm not getting excited about at all. It's just 5-color saga tribal, right? So you're just going to take all the ones that we already have in the format, and you're going to put in this deck. It's a nice payoff. I mean, if you have 4 or more lore counters, your commander has hexproof and indestructible. That's pretty great. And then on top of that, you have, you're not losing card advantage, I guess. There's really great value in the fact that every time you lose one of your sagas, you're going to get another one off the top of your library, right? You're revealing cards from the top of your library until you reveal a saga card. And so you're guaranteed to get something here. You can do some top deck manipulation here to make sure you get something good. I just talked about Brainstorm in a video that will be coming out probably next week, where, that card can be really, really good in a strategy where I want to have stuff on top of my library, revealing stuff from the top of your library, same sort of scenario, right? So if I have a really expensive saga in my hand, I can now Brainstorm, put it on top of my library so that I guaranteed get it with my Tom Bombadil. Again, though, at the end of the day, there's not much to talk about here, right? Like, you have a 5-color commander that you're going to be doing sagas with. It's sort of generically good, not super interesting. Moving on. Gandalf the Grey. Again, very iconic character. Obviously, maybe the most iconic, actually. It's probably the character, because you have Gandalf in the Hobbit series, which I think people were more familiar with. Like, I read The Hobbit in high school. A lot of people did back when they were in school. And people were less familiar with the actual Lord of the Rings series until the movies came out. That's what I wasn't very familiar with it until the Lord of the Rings series came out, but he's also in that. So he's sort of in both of those popular series. So for that reason, I think he's probably the most known character in Lord of the Rings. What's he doing here? 3 blue and a red. Avatar Wizard 3/4. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, choose one that hasn't been chosen. So again, first of all, blue-red for Gandalf the Grey. I don't know if, yeah, I mean, okay. I don't know if I love that color combination there. Already, though, we're in an Is It Spellslinger theme. Again, there's a million commanders that are doing that already. But what are we getting out of it, though? You may tap or untap target permanent. Obviously, there's a lot you can do there. I like the modal aspect. Obviously, modal aspect on your commander is great. You know, I can react to the situations of my opponents doing stuff, which I always like, you know, depending on what the board currently looks like. But also, that gives you more options to build around, which I also like. So already, this is probably the most interesting build around of the commanders I'm talking about today, even though it is just another Is It Spellslinger commander. So I'm going to tap or untap another target permanent. There is a lot you can do there. You can do a tapping, untapping theme. You know, you could put in a card like, you know, any card that wants to be tapped. Surge Spanner, one of my personal favorites, right? Whenever it becomes tapped, you can pay 1 and a blue to bounce a permanent. So you can use your commander's ability on your Surge Spanner to tap it, right? That could be something you could do in this deck. Gandalf the Grey deals 3 damage to each opponent. So obviously, that's great, you know. Again, generically good, but there is some build around there. Again, Chandra's Incinerator, a card that I talk about a lot on my channel because I think it needs to see more play in the format. This is another deck that it's fantastic in because I cast an instant and sorcery. Each of my opponents are going to take 3 damage, which means my Chandra's Incinerator is only going to cost 1 red. So if I have my Chandra's Incinerator in play, I'm probably going to be using that ability a lot more because now I can be hitting my opponents for damage and then also killing their creatures. Also, though, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control. You may choose new targets for a copy. Hold on a second. So you're casting an instant or sorcery spell. This triggers, and then you can just copy the instant or sorcery spell you just cast, right? Oh, boy. And you know what? One of my favorite cards that doesn't see nearly enough play, Harmonic Prodigy, is bonkers in this deck, right? Because an ability of a shaman or another wizard you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. This is bananas in this deck, isn't it? Because your commander is a wizard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, that's a triggered ability. So now if I have my Harmonic Prodigy, I can cast my Lightning Bolt. My commander triggers, it triggers an additional time. So now I'm going to get 3 copies of that Lightning Bolt. Oh boy. And again, Lightning Bolt is not super impactful. What if I cast an Expropriate? Now I get 3 Expropriates, right? Is that what's happening here? If I have my Harmonica Prodigy and my Gandalf the Grey and I cast an Expropriate, I'm casting a sorcery, I can immediately copy it with my commander's ability, and my Harmonic Prodigy is going to trigger it again, and I get 3 copies of an Expropriate. So, in other words, game over. I mean, even 1 Expropriate is often going to be game over. Definitely going to be game over. Wow. Yeah, Harmonic Prodigy, slam dunk. I think it's a slam dunk on a lot of decks. Definitely slam dunk in this deck. Obviously, you can pick your commander's ability is triggering, so you can pick different modes, right? If my Harmonic Prodigy is giving me the 2 triggers, it triggers once, I choose 3 damage to each opponent, and then I choose, you know, it triggers again, so I get to choose something different. So, absolute slam dunk in this deck for sure. We haven't even gotten to the last ability yet. Put Gandalf on top of its owner's library. So you have an ability here to save your commander as well. What do you guys think? Is this better than Niv Mizzet even? Are a lot of people just going to take Niv Mizzet, set it aside, or put it in the 99 and then make Gandalf the Grey your commander? You can obviously do so. Again, that's what I don't love about commanders like this is I have a Is It Spellslinger deck, and now I'll just swap out commanders. My commander goes in the 99 and Gandalf the Grey, since it's better, now becomes the commander of the deck. I don't love that. You're not really enticing people to make a lot of new interesting decks, right? And with a lot of these commanders, there's not a lot of commanders here that are enticing people to make new interesting decks that we've never really seen before. Pretty much all of the commanders that I've talked about here are commanders that you're going to be just doing a lot of the things we've already seen in the format, which I don't really love. The fact that these are iconic characters certainly is going to make it so that people want to play them. And a lot of them are powerful. Not super interesting, though. I don't know. What do you guys think? I'm a little bummed out by a lot of these, to be quite honest. I don't really love them as commanders. Again, we're seeing a lot of the same things we've seen before. Not super interesting. I think a lot of decks are just going to, there's a lot of decks out there, like the 5-color Tribal Saga deck is just going to be like, hey, I now have a commander. I'll just swap out the one I had before. I think there's going to be a lot of swapping going on here where people are just swapping out the commander for the one they already have and sticking that in the 99, certainly with Gandalf the Grey. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. That is it for today, though, and thanks for tuning in.